I'm being inducted into a new world. It's very futuristic, very retro, very cool, and very male.
Actually, it's his world.
He's Marc Newson, one of the hottest designers on the planet, and he designs, well, everything.
A car, a jet, a suborbital jet rocket, a spaceship, and sculptural furniture, ovens, sculptural lights, labs, sculptural everything, dish drainer, suitcases, vibrator, shoes, interiors, sneakers, actually, binoculars, luggage, torch, taps, tables, numerous tables, mobile telephones, chairs, of course.
Is there anything you haven't designed, Marc?
Yes, but I can't remember what it is. I haven't got a clue.
Fortunately, we have. Marc Newson's work sells for record prices in the world's leading auction houses and galleries. He's hired by the world's largest corporations to think out of the box. And he operates at the cutting edge of industrial technology, heading for the final frontier. But where does it all come from? And how does he keep it all in his head?
Marc Newson's taking me on a trip from 60s Australia to 21st century space to show me who he is, what he does, and why he does it.
I'm proud to say I'm a geek. You'd have to be a geek. Designers are geeks. Good designers are geeks. Bad designers are not geeks. I think there's a correlation. Geeks are interested in detail. They're obsessed. They're interested in the sort of the minutiae of how things work. And if you're not, then how can you really know what you're doing?
Marc Newson matters because he's different in a world of sameness. This is sort of design at volume 11, and it's screaming at you. And either you're going to like that, or you're not.
In a way, Marc has very sensibly used his career as a designer to fulfil all his sort of boy's own space-age fantasies. You've got the car, you've got the plane, now we've got the rocket.
He does create objects that have a kind of immediate desirability about them. It's a very special gift to be able to endow inanimate objects with that kind of charm.
On a grey day in London, I'm hanging out, waiting for a VIP to arrive. Actually, I'm waiting for this lorry. And in it, a shining star of late 20th century furniture. They're undressing a Lockheed lounge. The piece that turned Marc Newson into the design equivalent of a rock star. She, Amber Lockheed, is definitely a she, is something of a diva, even arriving with her own security guard. And now, she's ready for her close-up. Marc Newson was just 23 when he made 13 of these improbable objects with his bare hands. He couldn't get rid of them then. These days, they're so valuable, we're not even allowed to sit on them.
Is it comfortable?
Well, no, not really. It was never really intended to be comfortable, but when I was in art school, my sort of rule of thumb was that if it was more comfortable than a bus stop, it would sort of generally qualified as being something something worth sitting on. But it was kind of more of a sculpture, I think, than a chair. The chair was just a way of was an excuse to bring it to life.
In the back of his mind, Jacques-Louis David's famous portrait of Madame Récamier on a chaise of the traditional variety. The Lockheed reference came later, in homage to the Lockheed Corporation, when Marc realised his riveted aluminium exterior recalled aircraft construction.
You know, I had this vision of an object in my head. I mean, I had the shape in my head, and I had the material in my head. I mean, I had its sort of visual aspect. I mean, I had a pretty accurate idea of what it looked like. A globule of mercury or something, like a seamless, smooth, shiny object. But I really didn't know how I was going to do it. You know, I had no idea how I was going to realise this on a technical level.
How did you?
I got this big lump of foam in the backyard of a workshop that I was, a friend's workshop that I was sharing. And I sort of traced some lines on with a giant felt tip pen and started literally hacking away at this big lump of foam with a wire brush, a very, very sort of savage wire brush, and just kind of furiously sort of hacked away. And there was just like shit all over the place, you know, foam flying around in the neighbour's house, and it felt like a kind of a monumental moment for me. Because when it was done, it was done. It just sort of appeared. And then came, you know, the challenge of having to make it look like a piece of metal. I never really originally wanted it to be covered in panels. You know, this was really the only way I could think of achieving something close to the effect that I'd visualised.
Marc originally sold his Lockheed lounges for about £1,000. 22 years later, they're breaking records.
550,000, 600,000.
Not bad for his first project post-art school.
Back on the telephone, it's going to go. £650,000. Last chance in the room. Sold
With a
there.
tap of the hammer, the Lockheed becomes the most expensive piece of furniture by a living designer ever to sell at auction. Aggregate price, just over £750,000. Over $1.5 million.
Marc, for better or worse, and not always to his liking, is the undisputed star of what's called the sort of design art market. And this is the market for limited edition furniture, sort of sculptural in very improbable shapes, generally uncomfortable to sit on, and usually extortionately expensive. And this is a market that's been developing over the last decade, but in the last year or two has absolutely exploded.
Marc Newson still designs limited edition furniture, but he doesn't make it all by himself anymore. So who does? Well, he travelled the world to find people with the right skills. People who could create the seamless shapes of metal that he had in his head without the rivets of the Lockheed lounge. And he ended up with this lot in an Aston Martin panel-beating workshop just outside Milton Keynes.
It was sort of stumbling into an Aladdin's cave. I knew once I got here that the ideas that I had in my head were doable.
We get a lot of people come around here, Japanese, Americans, Europeans. They walk in here and they're absolutely gobsmacked that people still take a flat sheet of metal and turn it into something.
I've just never seen anyone that works with metal in the way that they do. What they do is more akin to silversmithing. You know, they really work metal as if it was a piece of fabric or a piece of plasticine. What you see at the end of the day is this kind of incredibly sensual and refined object.
Amongst the cars, a Marc Newson creation is emerging.
What is this object?
It's the black hole table.
You like it?
Not especially, no. It's not one of my favourite pieces. I mean, it's one of them things I think you either love it or hate it, but each to their own.
Marc loves being here, and he can't wait to get stuck in. Richard, on the other hand, can't wait to get a few things off his chest.
These have been a nightmare.
Really? The worst one?